As Jimmy said, my name's Daren White. I'm Academic Technologies Lead at Lift Schools. We are one of the largest MATs in England with 57 schools. We've got 31 primaries, 21 secondaries and 5 special schools. And the focus today, I'm a big advocate of AI. I'm not by training a technology teacher. I was a modern linguist. So I love the kind of challenge of new technology. And back in 2012 and then 2016, the challenges that things like Google Translate brought to my classroom taught me to adapt and to use the technology for good. So I'm going to be focusing today on AI, which you might have heard of. And I'm not the only ginger person talking about it this week. But also how we can really use that in our classrooms from an inclusivity point of view. So let's get started. I'll just share this first of all, and I'm not going to read it out to anybody, but this quote really spoke to me because inevitably in schools, in my job, training a lot of teachers and working with other staff who train a lot of teachers, there's inevitably that kind of fear around AI and not knowing how to use it effectively, and a worry that, okay, it's a bit of a flash in the pan and it's not going to go anywhere. But as Salman Khan says here, you know, if you invest that time now, you're going to reap it back tenfold or more in the future. So if we prepare ourselves now, not only are we preparing ourselves for prime time, but we're also preparing our young people as well. And for me, that's not just about GCSE success. That's not about where are they when they're 22 and they've moved on to university, apprenticeship or career, but actually where are they when they're 25, when they're 30, when they're 50? How have we set those foundations for them to have adult success, which is more important than anything else, I think. So that time is now. And I always share this slide with staff because the Gartner curve of technological innovation, I think, is really important. The pink line on there represents roughly where we generally are now with generative AI. We're over the peak of inflated expectations, and we're starting to really dive into what it can and can't do effectively. So it's given us the opportunity to see the hype and what it can do, but now we're starting to really challenge it and find out maybe what it can't do so well. And I think that's a really exciting time because it gives us the opportunity to kind of really pull it apart, really critically think about the application and make it better. In the past, that journey from innovation trigger to plateau of productivity and business as usual might have taken sort of 10 years. The speed of development that we're seeing with AI at the moment, we're probably only looking at 3 to 4 years, if that. And I think that's only going to get faster. So my message to all of our staff is you can't run from it. You can't, put your ostrich head in the sand. And the quicker you get involved, the more you're going to see the valuable application for you as an individual in the classroom, but more importantly for your learners. So I wanted to focus today on some practical ideas on how you might use AI to really rewrite the script for our young people. As Lift Schools, we've done some work with Google as part of their AI Works program, along with some other trusts and also the world of work and industry as well, about how you might get the most out of a large language model. And we've been following this particular framework. And there's 2 ways you can go about using AI. You can use that iterative approach where you ask it one question, then you ask it something else, then you kind of say, oh yeah, that's great, but can you also do this? Or you can use the more structured approach. And if you follow the likes of Dan Fitzpatrick, he uses his prepare and his edit approach. Here we're looking at making sure that within our prompting, we include a persona or a role for the LLM prompt, be very clear about the task we're trying to achieve, be clear about the context of what we're trying to achieve, and then the format. And using that to help structure those prompts for our teachers so that they get the results they're looking for faster. And it will be the same for pupils moving forward, because we all know that AI, it's resource heavy. So the quicker we get success, the less of a drain on the sustainability side of things we're looking at. And the more we share, the quicker we get to that success. So just sharing some examples. Here's a prompt that we use with our staff and we've played around with, and they now adapt, obviously. but using the persona, acting as an experienced special needs teacher, because then it's going to go and look for information relevant to that. There's your task. That's what I want it to do. Here's the context of why I want it to do it. And here's the format that I want it to appear in. And it's not always perfect. And sometimes we do have to iterate and change. But that's the approach that we've been using with our staff. And the feedback has been really positive. And that's with teachers, with principals, that's with senior leaders across the trust as well. Always using this persona, task, context format. And you can apply that to anything. So there's a second example here. Acting as an experienced teacher, list the key terms for the topic you're teaching and provide definitions using the Collins co-build approach. And we built that into the context because we wanted the definitions that are provided to be really easily understandable and clear. So we deliberately asked for the Collins co-build approach. And we want, in this case, no more than 4 key terms, but obviously you can change that and adapt it as you see fit. So that's using a large language model with a structured prompt to maybe adapt to different learners' needs. But then we've also experimented with things like Gemini and ChatGPT. This is a GIF that I put together because, BETT Wi-Fi. You never guarantee on a live demo. So in this case, I'm actually speaking to Gemini, which you can't hear. But I asked it to give me a chapter-by-chapter breakdown of Wild Robot, which it's done. And then I go back and I speak to it again. And I can do this on my phone while I'm walking the dog and all these kind of things. So now I want a list of questions that can be used to check pupil comprehension and the correct answers. And that's because I might want some staff to do some intervention with pupils that haven't necessarily read the whole book in depth. So I want them to have the example answers so they know if the pupils are coming up with the right sort of suggestions. Here we've applied Bloom's taxonomy to it, so you've got different style of questioning. Here we've got the co-build approach coming in again with the key vocabulary. Here we've translated a summary of the book into Spanish for parents who are not English speaking. And then it just rolls around again. So just through interacting with Gemini in this case, but you can do the same with other large language models. Actually, this is what I want to achieve. How can we break that down? How can we differentiate that? Can we have one version that's for readers who are of reading age of 5 or 6? Can we have another version for reading ages 6 or 7? Can we have 12, 13? Can we have a version for parents as a summary of the book that haven't got a very high level of literacy? Can we translate that into several different versions that we can share with those parents? But like I said, with the intervention side of things, where I've got TAs who might be really, really busy, can I give them a breakdown of the book, a summary, some questions, and the kind of expected response so that they can really work with and support those pupils? And this is brilliant as well for catch-up. And I don't really like that term, but I've just said it, so I'm going to have to stick with it now. But in terms of those pupils that maybe have been absent, and we know that absenteeism is a challenge at the moment, you might be doing class reading. They've missed the last 2 lessons. What a great way of actually saying, can you give me a quick overview of these 2 chapters of this book, because this student has been absent and I want to get them back up to speed as quickly as possible. Shout out to a former MFL, not colleague, but kind of acquaintance, if you like, through social media, Vince Everett, who turned into digital what I used to do on my whiteboard with a pen. I used to try and dual code, you're like that. When I was teaching vocabulary as a language teacher, I'd try and dual code so that the pupils could memorize the word by visualizing. And in this case, these are Vince's examples. And you can do this with the text to image generator in Canva, Gemini, ChatGPT. So this one here is for Spanish. And this is the image, if you like, for dual coding the word for socks. Calcetines. Calcetines. So kind of dual coding it that way so the students visualize a cow with a 13 on it wearing socks, calcetines. Okay? And in this case, this is the Spanish word for a watch is reloj. So this is the reloj ness monster. And it just really helps the dual code and help it stick. And so I then took that And I was kind of like, why did I spend hours drawing this sort of stuff? Because I thought I was like Neil Buchanan on Heart Attack, probably. So I took that into Canva and I started to apply the same thing. So in this case, I've asked the text to image for a man running from the bed to the door and the alarm clock is sounding. Okay? So what we've got here is a man who is spurting to the door, because an alarm clock in Spanish is a despertador. So it's that kind of dual coding. How can we break it down into smaller parts to help them remember? And very easy to do. Like I said, with Canva, Gemini, ChatGPT, any other text-to-image generator. So really switching it up and finding other ways of getting the same message across. And I like just like that. Here is an example of, I'm in Canva in this case, and I'm using a Canva presentation. And what it enables us to do is to convert existing content into other formats. I'm a big Canva user. There's not a day goes past. So in this case, it's a slide, and I'm asking it to turn it into an executive summary, but it might also be an infographic. It might be a poster. It might be, in some cases, a document that's a blog post. You can turn it into a LinkedIn post if you're that way inclined. But you can even turn it into song lyrics or a poem. And if we're talking about taking the content of a lesson and making it stick for pupils, taking what might be quite a dry slide deck, it's not my slide deck, so no criticism to whoever made this one, but what might take quite dry content, turning that into song lyrics or a poem, and then maybe coordinating with the music department or the music teacher and say, hey, we've got the lyrics, let's make the song, and then recording it and playing that back in the morning as they come in. Do you remember yesterday we learned this? Here's the song we got from it and everything else. Just helps it stick in another way. And it's as simple as going up to the top left there, clicking resize, choosing your format, and it opens it in another doc for you in seconds. It's super fast. So that's one example. And then more recently, we've been experimenting with Notebook LM, which is from Google and now uses Google Gemini 2.0. So you can upload up to 50 of your own sources, which gives you a kind of protected walled garden. So it's only looking at the sources you provide. That could be Google Docs, slides, PDFs, websites, audio files, video files. It will produce a summary for you. It will create study guides, briefing docs, timelines, FAQs with a few clicks, but it will also generate a podcast for you. So if you've got pupils who struggle to read, you can turn your content into a podcast that they can listen to. And as you can see here, we've also got access now to the interactive mode, which pupils haven't got yet, but you can actually interrupt that podcast and join in now, which is pretty powerful. And you then download those. Pupils haven't got access to this, but you can download the created resources and share it with them, in our case via Google Classroom. So that's Notebook LM, really great variety of use cases. But then what I found after using Notebook LM for some time is sometimes when you generate those podcasts, which is great, there can be a little bit samey and a little bit formulaic. So I've been also using Play AI's PlayNote, which gives you more options because you can create your podcast with 2 speakers, but you can also upload any content, PDF, slide deck, anything you like, and create a children's story from it, a detailed summary, an executive briefing, a debate, or a parody. Sometimes it's quite good fun. And what I like about this is you can choose the voice. So you've got regional accents and things like that you can choose from, or you can even create your own one. You don't need a paid account to be able to use it. So that's another way of just switching things up and presenting maybe the same information in different ways for different users. And you might find that it works for some of the time and not all of the time, but it gives you that variety and that option. And then, of course, you've got things like translation, which are often built in natively, in this case through Google Docs, just going to the Tools menu, Translate Document, and choosing the language that you want to translate to. So whether it's a Google Doc, whether it's a Word document, whatever, using the opportunity to just translate immediately, and it creates a copy rather than translating the original, which you can then share out with your learners. So those are the native options. But then we looked at how you might also do that through the large language model using that same structure. using the persona and the task and the context and then the format. So just a couple of examples here. In this case, as an experienced translator. And we use that rather than an experienced language teacher because you get much better results, okay? Particularly picking out this. This is the key bit that people often miss out on when you're translating, is that sometimes it's not immediately obvious exactly what people are getting at. There might be some innuendo, there might be some cultural misunderstanding and things like that. So if you're not sure, be honest about it. Tell us you're not sure, and at least then we can go and double check, rather than just passing it off as this is definitely what it means. And then in this case, my wife works in a school for severe pupils with severe autism. How might you use the ABA tutor approach to suggest ways that content could be adapted? Giving ideas, because that's what large language models are really good at, coming up with ideas really quickly. Not to say you've got to go with them, but it can really prompt that approach. And then also thinking about other aspects of accessibility, not just things like the captions along the top here, game changing in the classroom. We already know that Generation Z and I think they're Gen A now, aren't they? They're very new lot. I lose track. It's like number plates. You know, the number and the proportion of those pupils who are choosing to use subtitles when they're watching TV or Netflix or whatever it might be has massively grown. So not only does it increase accessibility for those that want to be able to read and maybe have hearing difficulties, but it's also developing everyone's literacy. So it's, you know, it's useful for some, well, it's necessary for some, but it's useful for everybody. So in this case, this is one of our school's newsletters, which is made as a Canva website. And I've done the same thing as I did earlier. I've just gone to the resize button, and instead of transforming it into a different type of document, just click translate. And there's, I think, over 90 languages that it will just go from that to that Gujarati version in seconds. Now, where you've used an image that contains text flattened, it doesn't translate that. But anywhere where you've got recognized text, it will translate it. You can get around that by actually typing that in yourself, and then it will translate it. But what some of our schools are doing is creating their newsletter and then making several other copies for those key languages for the parents in the community. And it's literally seconds. And then another thing, Canva, a lot of people don't realize, but through Canva's AI, you've got the alt text suggestion option. So you click on your image, ask for the alt text, it comes up with a suggestion, and then you can change it. I try and use alt text every time I possibly can, and sometimes I forget, but this is a real help because it gives me that steer. A lot of the time, I have no idea how to describe what I'm looking at. I don't know the best way of doing it because I'm not really reading that text. Sometimes I put a little like subliminal message in there just to see if anyone's checking it. I rarely get anything back. So this, you can do this with Canva, but you can also do it with a large language model. So in this case, I've used Gemini. I've created my own gem. And what it does is it allows me to upload any image, and I've prompted it to generate alt text for any image I upload that I can then copy and paste and drop in for social media or for any other purpose. And it comes up with a description like that, which I would not come up with myself. I would not do a job that's done. And because that's a repetitive task that I'm doing often, that's a massive time saver and a stress saver because I'm not worrying, have I done it in a way that's accessible? Is it getting that message across? I can rely on this to do it. And that's just built for me as a gem, but you can do the same with a custom GPT as well. So lots of different approaches. And of course, through advanced voice mode, through GPT and Gemini, you can also now do things like live translation, which I'm not going to demonstrate because with the noise and everything else, it's going to be like really problematic. But you can just have a conversation between two people who don't speak the same language. Give it the instructions. I only speak English. This person only speaks Polish, for example. Translate between the two of us so that we can have a conversation. Our schools are using this with parents to really ease the process of parental meetings, particularly where there's upset, concern, or a complaint where, you know, emotions are high. And the lack of accessibility just makes that worse. And being able to use something like this, just popping the phone on the desk and having everything translated backwards and forwards so everyone understands what's going on. Our head teachers in particular have said that's been a game changer for parental engagement as well. So it's not just about the pupils. So I wanted to kind of finish off with this, and props to Dan Fitzpatrick. In his book, Infinite Education, he talks a lot about where we're aiming and what we need to be considering for that long-term goal. So just 4 questions, which I'm not going to read out, but I would encourage you to be thinking about. I particularly like this bottom one. In what ways might we be inadvertently preparing our students to compete with AI rather than harness its potential? We're going around talking about cheating and catching people out using it. We're really missing the point. So I just want to finish up with one final thing, and this is the main piece of advice that I give to all of our staff and to pupils and to anybody else who will listen, basically, which is follow that flow. Always start with the why, okay? Think about leading with the need. Why is it you're thinking about using AI? What's the reasoning behind that? And then thinking about breaking it down into sections. You might be thinking of a process you want to streamline. Initially, we might think we need AI to do the whole thing. Actually, it might not be appropriate for AI to do the whole thing, but it might do a really good job on part of that process. And that in itself really transforms things for you. So break it down into smaller chunks and see where it might apply with that why in mind. Then play with it, obviously safely and securely, respecting people's data and everything else. So play with it safely together, compare with each other what works and what didn't. Coming back to that sustainability point about sharing backwards and forwards, reducing the zero strike rate and everything else. Then fine tune it, adapt it and iterate it. And once you've got it to where you think you need it, use it for a while and then come back and review the impact of it. Because that's the most important thing. It's got to be having an impact. In this case, from an accessibility point of view, on pupils and parents as well, potentially, but in anything that we do, focusing on that side of things. So I'm going to bring that slide back just to give you an opportunity to have her again. And thank you very much for listening.